It's been kind of challenge after challenge. We got married last summer.
We are just married!
Key on your stock!
Then it was 5 months of wedded bliss before her diagnosis. For a couple that's relatively young and has been largely displaced for a good chunk of our relationship, proven we've proven our hearts to each other, especially through this last ordeal. Anna's from Budapest, so she was living there at the time that we met, and we were working for the same company. We were working for an international tech company. I was based in Los Angeles, and I had just started the job, and we oddly enough started communicating on LinkedIn, and started flirting very heavy on LinkedIn, of all places. That was our dating site. So we met in LA for the first time. We spent a week together, and that was it. That's all we needed. And then we got married last summer, and then it was 5 months of wedded bliss before her diagnosis. For us, it all happened so fast. Anna got COVID in October of 2021, and not, nothing serious, and she seemed to recover. And I think in between November and December, she'd been really displaying symptoms of some fatigue, the only thing I could call it is kind of breathlessness. We were in Chicago for a week then in mid-December, and toward the end, she was really starting to having a lot of flu-like symptoms. So we were walking around a museum, and she got very warm, very sweaty. We flew home. There was a week between the time we got home and when we went to urgent care. And during that week, things got increasingly worse. Hindsight, I look back and I'm like, I think in my gut, I knew. I think we're on WebMD, and I'm seeing like, okay, at one end of the spectrum, she could be anemic. At the other end of the spectrum, it could be leukemia. And I think in my gut, I was like, this is bad. Like that small voice at the back is going, this is going to be bad. But the reason brain, the human brain, that this evolved brain is like, nope, it's going to be fine. It's all good. So I think there's a lot of conflict there while you're in it. And I think, that I think there's a lot of there was a lot of underlying anxiety, certainly some sleeplessness, and just like some dread. But I think that I was still trying to talk myself into believing that it was all going to be fine. Again, the timeline for us was so compressed because we went to urgent care on a Sunday, and then by Sunday night we knew pretty much what the deal was. I don't want to lose the memory or what we've learned of any of this, but if I could kind of scrub one clean, I think that first night would be the one I would say, like, can you just snip that out of my brain and toss it in the trash? Because I think seeing her, I remember her trying to take a shower and put stuff in a duffel bag for us to drive to the ER, and her just shaking and so afraid of not knowing what we were going to hear. So we drove to the hospital. They took her into the ER first to kind of see what was going on. And then they called me in and they had told her, there's about an 80%, 90% chance that this is leukemia, that this is cancer. And so they told us right there that that was the greatest likelihood. When you have she has no family history. We had no reason, going into the onset of symptoms that this would be the outcome. I think it was just like absolutely 100% shock at first. And I remember Hannah asked, if you want to get out, now would be the time. And I was, of course, like, well, it's ridiculous. I do remember walking out of the ER, getting into the car, and driving back to our house, and like crying, and I'm angry, like kind of you're in a fit of rage because you're like, this is unfair. I'm kind of lamenting that, and I have a distinct memory of driving and crying and mad at the universe. And then all of a sudden I just stopped crying and I was like, I can be angry, but there's nobody to be angry to. Like this is not an argument. Her having this or not having this is not an argument that I'm having with anyone. And so, like, is it unfair? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's all unfair. Everybody, this diagnosis is unfair for everyone. And I'm not saying that doesn't matter. And I think you have to, like, everybody has to go through that. Every patient and every, all of the people who are supporting the patient has to go through that anger and like resentment and like fury, but the why, I mean, there's not an answer and there's nobody to appeal to. So I went back to our house and I packed our bags. And once Anna and I were together at the hospital there, and once we got the diagnosis from the oncologist, which was the next day, I mean, he came in and said, we know it's leukemia. We know it's acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We know it's, B cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, pH negative. We know exactly what it is. We know exactly how to fight it. Here's the treatment protocol. Once you accept the diagnosis, then it's just a matter of kind of the logistics of reckoning with everything else. And I have also said that a situation like this, when it's life or death or cancer, it's sort of everything's sort of easy because there's no like all the questions are gone. It's just a matter of like, well, we have to do whatever we have to do to keep her, to treat her, to fix this. So all of everything else kind of falls in line after that. It's just a matter of how we do it. I think I'm really just probably starting to process stuff in a productive way now. I think it was both shocking. I also think we were a little bit lucky that our diagnostic timeline was so short. We did have to do a lot of stuff very suddenly, and it was very, I think, we had to move overnight. We had to figure out job stuff we had to do everything overnight. And I think that we were rather lucky in that way because there wasn't time to dwell on anything. There was only time to act. And even her oncologist said, you could go get a second opinion, but I don't think you have time. She was about a week or two away from a stroke. So it was just like, well, he was like, I think we should do chemo and it's going to take 3 years. And there was one moment where Anna was like, oh, I can't do this for 3 years. And I was like, well, there's no alternative right now. So we ultimately just had to do. So I think we both clicked into survival, like a survival mode immediately. So I think and just given the structure of her treatment protocol, it gave us a lot of like milestones to hit and a lot of goals to work toward. She was in the hospital for 30 days, and then it was just a matter of getting through each course, each phase of treatment. And I think that actually it made it easy, but I don't think that it necessarily was healthy, because it put us in a state of, I think, fight or flight for like a year, 9 months. The reality is that trauma often doesn't happen while while the traumatic experience is taking place, right? Trauma is a byproduct. It often happens after, and so it's kind of it's very complex, because by the time the experience is over, the people around you are ready for you to be better. But that's often where your mental health, or your the quality of your mental health, or emotionally, you might be at your worst because you've only just started processing. I think that there was, from a caregiving standpoint, uh, her treatment protocol got, kind of varied in. So she had some courses where she was, doing okay, and then she had some courses where she was barely conscious. And so my role really, um, uh, I kind of, the amount of care I was giving, kind of was regulated based on that. So there was a lot of logistic, getting, stocking the kitchen with the right foods, making sure that we had stuff that made her comfortable, fixing meals, getting her to the bathroom or whatever, getting her showered if need be. And then, we were driving up to the clinic or the hospital for every appointment. And I think I sort of thrive in periods, in stretches where I have to satisfy logistical demands. So I think in a weird way, I was sort of at my best when the demand was high. And I think that even though I was conscious of the fact that I needed to look out for my mental health, I think I didn't put a lot of energy into it until much later. I think I sought out a therapist, maybe, and I went to a couple sessions of therapy, and it felt a little like, putting a band-aid on an open wound. And I was like, well, this feels like a waste of time. And then I just, I didn't do it then for the bulk of the year. And it wasn't actually until Anna started to get better. And once we kind of, and I think we didn't really get out of the, we weren't really like out of the jungle until maybe November, when her current treatment option was introduced to us as a way forward. Um, and but it has been since then that I've really noticed, and maybe since a little bit earlier, that I've really noticed the challenges of my mental health. And so it has kind of spurred me into action for my own sake. And I sought out not only therapy, but maybe psychiatry and a little medication, a little bit of self-care, and a little bit of peer-to-peer, making sure that I'm part of, talking to other caregivers, making sure that I'm accessing any resources that I have available, of which there are many. There are enough, I think, right now, specifically for caregivers. Um, and so I think that would be the other thing that I would encourage caregivers to do, is don't count on one path for mental or emotional wellness. But I think with spouse, significant other, parent, child, I think that caregivers have a difficult time. I think an inability to, or a reluctance to recognize and identify personal needs, and to make an attempt, like put in the effort to satisfy those needs, is inherent to caregiving. in those scenarios, because when it's a loved one that has a diagnosis that's as serious as cancer, our human instinct, our human, maybe not instinct, but our human response, our socialized response is to say like, well, what do my needs matter when my loved one has cancer? It's also incredibly unhealthy to go into a situation like that, denying your own personal needs, because if you're not good, how are you going to take good care of your your loved one? It can lead to frustration and resentment. I also think that it's very complicated because, and this is something that I think we probably don't talk about often enough, but I think it's very interesting and it is starting to come up. Anna and I talk about it all the time, that as she's gotten better, we're a little bit like ships passing in the night, because she's, not only is she kind of forged with this new identity as a survivor, but she's also getting what she lost back. She's getting her health back, right? She's like slowly building back up. For the caregiver, this role that you have sort of adopted and has become, you know, has become your identity, because in this particular instance, caregiving kind of involves helping to keep someone alive. Yeah, this identity that you've sort of adopted in order to keep your loved one going, alive, taken care of, it is kind of like sands through your fingers. It's slowly slipping away, and as that happens, as you become less needed in that way, and I know for me, as I became less needed, and my wife is a very like independent, not only an independent person, but kind of she's the kind of person that's like, what can I do for you? And she takes care of me. I mean, she's the caretaker in our marriage, the caregiver in our marriage. I'm the caregiver in this situation. Um, Once she starts feeling ready to kind of be again, the moment she starts feeling better, she's like, "Oh, I can do this. I'll take care of this. I'll take care of this." And I was like, wait, that's my job. Please, you know, it starts to kind of like slip away, and you get it's a loss of purpose, and there is a depression to loss of purpose, and you start to feel sad at a time when you know intellectually that you should be celebrating. So you're like, what the hell am I feeling right now? And I'm not saying that this happens to all caregivers. Certainly, I'm sure there are caregivers out there who are like, what are you talking about? But it's what I experienced. It's important to recognize because, again, I think during it, the shock of the diagnosis and the shock of treatment and the shock of this new life can prevent the caregiver from getting care, taking care of themselves, seeking out, support. So this moment when the demand on them is less and the risk for some mental health struggles might be highest. I think when this first happened to us, I got a lot of advice that was like something in the vein of like, stay strong, be a rock. Like, and not that that's wrong, because if you're the caregiver, you do have to, your partner has, your loved one has cancer. You do have to be, I think be a rock is like, however, like maybe it's terrible advice, because what does that mean? A rock is like, what is that? There's nothing that rock does. It just is. It is a rock. Like that's why a rock can be a rock, is because it is one. I'm a human. I don't, and very, very lucky to have a relationship with my wife where we kind of don't tolerate holding anything back, and we're very open and upfront. And um, I so I think advice wise, I would say like be not be strong for the patient. Do everything you can for yourself to make sure that you can be strong for your patient. I think that's the advice. Like, you can't just be a rock. You can't just adopt strength. You can't just decide to be strong. You got to do stuff that helps you be strong. But I think the other advice is like, whatever you're feeling is justified. I mean, within reason. But like, I think sometimes, a caregiver, you have those ideations where you're like, I want to run away, and I want this to be over in some way, or I want to get away from this. And of course you do. Of course. And I think then, denying that or feeling bad for feeling that is doing you a lot more harm than you might think. So I think accepting what you're feeling is also important. But I think the big one is just you got to do what you can to be strong. You can't just be strong.